Welcome back, history enjoyers, to another episode of Fistory. As you can see, I am wearing my Christmas hat. It is the middle of the holiday season. I hope everyone is having an awesome holiday season time thing. This episode is coming out on a Tuesday because last night I was on the millennial English banquet, which was really good. So it'll probably won't be too many people in the chat. If you got the notification and turned up, thank you very, very much for coming. Otherwise, if you're watching this on the replay, I hope you enjoy this. This will be part 2 of the Munster Rebellion, or the Tafelreich von Munster, which was a sort of like very, very weird proto-communist overthrow of the city of Munster in 1534 to 1535. Now, last episode, we covered the sort of takeover of the city and things getting sort of increasingly worse. Most of this, well, basically all of this, is based upon this book, False Prophets and Preachers, Henry Gresbeck's account of the Anabaptist Kingdom of Munster, Bericht von der Wiedertaufe in Munster, in English. And I have posted the link in the chat, in all the chats. I'll probably post, I should really post it in the description. You can download this book and read it yourself if you wish to. I found this book particularly fascinating because it is a sort of a first-hand account of what happened. Although, because it is a first-hand account, it sort of leaves off some of the ending parts. So I guess we'll just have to sort of rely upon Wikipedia for that. Don't worry, it has a happy ending. You know, after the starvation and all the horrors, the people responsible were executed and strung up. So, you know, never let it be said that communism never has a happy ending. There's some pretty like crazy art associated with this, I gotta say. This whole event really captured the minds of the, you know, of Germany generally. This is the steeple of St. Lambert's Church in Munster. Even to this day, there are 3 cages hanging from the top of the steeple, in which the bodies of the leaders of the Munster Rebellion, so that would have been John of Leyden, Copenhagen, what's this guy's name? So this is this is John of Leyden. You can see he was sort of basically like the king at the end. This is like quite an amazing picture. I quite like the text as well on the side. Gottes Macht ist mein Kraft. So German is not my first language. But it's interesting to frame this. Gottes Macht, to make God, right? Ist mein Kraft, is my job, is my calling. You wouldn't really, I don't think there's like an English comparison to that, right? Like, you know, to say you are making God, as it were. Bernd Knipperdolling was one of the other leaders. I believe it was Leyden and Knipperdolling. This is John of Leyden again. He wound up being the sort of aborted king of Munster, and John Matthias, who was sort of the original leader of the radical Anabaptists. I only actually discovered reading the Wikipedia article today that apparently John Matthias met a rather sticky end. Where is it? Here we go. In April 1534, on Easter Sunday, Matthias, who had prophesied God's judgment to come on the wicked on that day, led a procession from the city with 12 followers, as he believed himself to be the second Gideon. They're really into the Hebrew Bible, these guys, right? Like really, really, really into the Old Testament and the Hebrew Bible. This has led myself and a few other people to like wonder whether there was any significant Hebraic influence on the Anabaptists or the events at Munster, given the way that things played out. It's hard to say, but there are some things that maybe hint to that. He and his followers were cut off and taken. Matthias was killed, his head placed on a pole for all in the city to see, and his genitals nailed to the city gate. That's some old time religion stuff there, man. And he was then succeeded, by John of Leyden, who sort of became the sort of the I was going to say Stalin, but I guess more Lenin, or the Jim Jones of the peace, if you like, except instead of like a mass suicide, it was just sort of like an awful decline of starvation. Although apparently the leaders of the city were in fact planning to set fire to the entirety of Munster if they were going to be captured. So it does have a very sort of Jim Jonesy quality to it. The 25-year-old John of Leyden was subsequently recognized as Matthias's religious and political successor, justifying his authority and actions by claiming visions from the heavens. His authority grew until eventually he proclaimed himself as the successor of David and adopted royal regalia, honors, and the absolute power in the new Zion. So this is very Hebraic, right? Now, there was a lot of this going around at the time. Notably, even Martin Luther himself, during the Reformation, sort of fell for this idea that the way to understand the Old Testament was to go to the rabbis. This is a very, very bad idea. Do not go to the rabbis to get them to tell you about Christianity. They're not going to give you the straight dope on it. And of course, Luther eventually wrote that sort of that rather spicy book when he realized that he had been betrayed by the Jewish community and sort of like wound up reversing his position very dramatically. There were now in the town at least 3 times as many women of marriageable age as men, so he made polygamy compulsory. We covered this on the last episode, and he himself took 16 wives. Meanwhile, most of the residents of Munster were starving as a result of the year-long siege. After lengthy resistance, the city was taken by the besiegers on June 24th, 1535, and John of Leyden and several other prominent Anabaptist leaders were captured and imprisoned. Yay! In January 1536, John of Leyden, Bernhard Knipperdolling, and one more prominent fellow, Bernhard Krechting, were tortured and executed in the marketplace of Munster. Yay! Their bodies were exhibited in cages which hung from the steeple of St. Lambert's Church. Their bones were removed later, but the cages hang there still. According to a contemporary source, about 3,000 people died during the siege. All right, so we'll get on to what was going on. Now, just as a little bit of a recap, I actually missed this in the last episode, just to sort of drive home how... Oh, wait, entropy isn't live. Oh, thank you very much. God damn. Excuse me just for a second while I get entropy up. You can donate to the channel, send super chats, all that kind of like cool stuff through entropy or Ko-Fi. The linkies are in the description. Why did it do that? Why? Yes, the link is in the description. Please donate, in the spirit of Christmas, for like therapy beers and all kind of other stuff. Is entropy working now? It seems to be giving me a weird message. Oh no, it's working now. Okay. So yes, Ko-Fi or entropy. Right, now back to the thing. So just to drive home, like how very similar to communism this was, as I detailed in the last episode. They declared all property in common. They declared all wives in common. Many of the men, the burghers, the sort of what the Marxists would later call the bourgeoisie, left the city in order to summon help from the local lord, and they got locked out of the city, and they shouldn't have left their women there. But it's entirely probable that they didn't realize like quite how crazy these people were. They eventually seized everyone's gold and silver, started executing random people, did all kinds of like weird loyalty tests. It's all in the last episode. Check it out. But just to give you a bit of a flavor, the limping preacher, who was some sort of like weird savage prophet that managed to sort of gain the ear of the king at this point. Um, set a limit on clothing. This is fair way into the siege. So there stood up another prophet after this prophet. He too could produce great lies. Yeah, I bet. This man was John Duschent Scheuer. Man, my German sucks ass. John Duschent Scheuer. Duschent Scheuer. He had previously played the major role in the installation of John of Leyden as the king. He would go on to say that there would never be any more mercy. They were all going to sink down into hellfire and burn up. And because he could shout and terrify the folk this way, they made him into a prophet. This prophet had much rule in the city and would curse all the folk who they imagined were still unfaithful and wouldn't be obedient. The king and the counselors and the preachers informed the common folk that God had made him into a prophet, but it was the king and the counselors and the preachers who'd made him into a prophet. Whenever the prophet produced a lie, he would say, God has said to me what had supposedly been revealed to him. One time it was revealed to him how much clothing a Christian brother and a Christian sister were supposed to have. A Christian brother was not supposed to have more than one coat, 2 pairs of hose, 2 doublets, and 3 shirts. As for hoods and bonnets and for shoes, no decision was made about how many of these each individual should have. A Christian sister was not supposed to have more than 1 chemise, 1 dress, 1 pelt, 2 collars, 2 pairs of sleeves, 2 pairs of hose, and 4 shirt. Whatever further clothing each of the men and women had, they had to turn over. They also left each bed according to how many people were in the house, 4 pairs of sheets for each bed. Throughout the cities, the deacons then went around with a wagon in each parish, stopping at each house. The deacons went into the houses and said, God's peace be with you, dear brothers and sisters. I've come at God's behest, as our prophet has proclaimed for God's sake, and I'm to examine what you have in your house. If you have more than you need, we'll take that from you for God's sake and give it to those who need it. If you need or lack something, we are to give it to you in your necessity for the sake of God. So the deacons examined what each person had in his house. Whatever each person had in the way of clothing beyond what the prophet had proclaimed, they took from the people and threw it up into the wagon. But for those who needed something, it was difficult enough to get anything back. Funny how that works. Some got so little back that they died because of this. The deacons took as much in the way of men's and women's clothing as they could carry away, so that they got a house full of clothes. They gave this clothing to the foreigners who came rushing into the city. These people had no clothes. They probably sold it. Like, beneath all of this scamming and stuff like that, I suspect money was being made, and I mean, it's communism, right? Are we back? The stream just died for no bloody reason. Please let me know if we're back. Did it start up again, or like how's it going? Hang on, let me see. Okay, YouTube's back. Is Rumble back? Okay, we're back. Hopefully Rumble didn't just totally like close it. No, it seems like it's no waiting for stream, it's offline. Is it are we back on Rumble? God damn it. I'll have to like get the recording and oh, we're back. Okay. Good. Sorry about that, chaps. I have no idea what happened. So another very, very interesting thing that happened, again, this is something that you would see in the French Revolution a few hundred years later. They just decided to like rename everything in this sort of like weird paroxysm of iconoclasm. But the things that they renamed them were quite weird, right? So they renamed it these streets: Gold Street, West Street, North Street, Water Street, Silver Street. These sound like Jewish names, quite frankly, right? Like if they were Christians, they didn't rename it like St. Michael's Street, or St. Augustine Street, or anything like that. There seems to be this sort of very, very sort of atheist materialist streak running through this. And then they decided that they would rename the children because presumably they're having a lot of children because they all had so many wives. And every child would get like a different name based on the day of the month that they were born on, if I remember correctly. The king had the streets named after the gates, and in each street he had a small board hung on which it was written what the street was supposed to be. This street is called Gold Street or Silver Street, and so on. The other streets kept their name. There were too many of them, and John of Leyden had no plan for them. Whoever in his court called the gates or streets or the cathedral square, or any of the churches something other than what he'd ordained them, he had to drink a jar of water. I presume that would be like fetid water or something as a punishment. So where's the thing about the kids? Yes, here we go. Right. So the where's the thing about the kids? Yeah, so whenever a child was born, he had to go to the king and ask him for the name by which the child was to be called. The mother or the father to the child didn't dare give the child its name. The king gave the name according to the alphabet, and the child remained unbaptized. For all the children that were born in the city remained unbaptized until they came of age, Anabaptism. Such was the king's intention after he had kept the upper hand. So no, it wasn't on the day of the week. It was, I don't know, which which child. So they named them all basically via the alphabet. And then when they did that, when they ran out of letters in the alphabet, he gave the children the names after the prophets and the old father: David, Abraham, Isaac, Israel, Jacob, the old prophets and the patriarchs. So not Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. So you see where I'm going with this, right? Some children who were girls, the king named Ava. Some of the little boys, Adam. Many children were born in the city, but those rebaptizers who had many wives got the fewest children of all. Interesting. The king had 15 wives, and there was not a one of all of the wives who had children by the king. The king had one wife who was fruitful. This wife was Nipper Dolling's maid, and she'd previously been married to a Landsknecht. Right, so someone very, very helpfully, the great replacement of corrupt governments, dropped a comment on Odyssey on how to pronounce this. Thank you very, very much, great replacement. Landsknecht. I think I'm getting that right. That word is like, I speak some German, but like it's just, the meaning is farmhand of the land or a servant of the land. Thank you very, very much, mate. I appreciate that. Landsknecht. That's just gonna have to do, right? So the common people in the city would say that this child ought to belong to the Landsknecht, that it didn't belong to the king. The queen was also fruitful when she married John of Leyden. It was just a massive like fuckfest, basically, right? The queen had then previously been married to John Matthias. Man, she must have gotten around because he made himself out to be a prophet. He too was killed, so that this child didn't belong to the king, except that he was a stepfather to the child. Man, just mental. Then they went on and they started destroying all of the churches, right? This is not very Christian behavior. I'm just saying, right? The king gave other names to the cathedral and the old cathedral. The cathedral was called the Great Stone Quarry. The old cathedral and the chapels around the cathedral square, the small stone quarries. So, I mean, presumably they were also building like defensive works as well. And I imagine they were just stealing stone from the churches. Again, not terribly Christian behavior. Then again, I guess the Anabaptists believe that they were the one true church. So, maybe all the other churches, deserve to be destroyed. All I'm saying, not very Christian behavior. There were 7 parish churches in the city of Munster, apart from the cathedral. They destroyed or pulled down all the churches in the city apart from 2, and they tore down all the church towers, pulling down all the spires of the towers. This was done by a Hollander. Interesting. Just a Hollander, huh? Some guy who came from Holland. I mean, this is the thing, right? So much of what happened in Munster was a result of these influx of foreigners, Hollanders and Frisians. They just say, right? They don't say anything else about them. This makes me wonder if there were like any cryptos among them, as it were. This was done by a Hollander. His name was Francis, and he was an adventurous fool. This idiot set to it and sawed the spire of the tower underneath at the stonework, sawing apart the columns and leaving 2 or 3 columns standing intact. He bored holes into these columns and filled them with gunpowder, then knocked a strong plug in with a fuse. When the fuse was almost burnt up, the gunpowder went off. The pillars then blew apart. I mean, so this is systematic demolition of the churches. Why? Right? Like, you know, um, so they torn down the cathedral, they destroyed all the chapels. Um, I mean, they really like destroyed them like properly. Okay. Um, they knocked in the vaulting of the St. Martin's Church. I mean, this is like crazy. They smashed up the inside of St. Lambert's Church. St. Lambert's Church is still standing even today. That is the church that has the cages on it. They took the roof off. But they did leave the bells intact, presumably so they could ring them in case they were attacked or something like that. Um, yeah, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. So they had like an assault bell, and everyone had to like go to their places when the bell was rung. And as the siege sort of progressed, and the food began to run out, and of course the ruling class were just very very bored. The king would just sort of ring the bell and like watch everybody scurry around because he was like just generally bored. Dude, bloody hell. It sounds so terrible. Let me see. The articles of the Anabaptist is next. Let me see. It's on the next page. um, so this guy who's writing it, Henry Gresbeck, in this chapter, he basically rails against the Anabaptist. And he's like, well, why were they bad? He said, first, they didn't uphold the 10 Commandments. They chased everyone away from his possessions, his house and home, and they took from the people everything they had. All goods were to be held in common. They wanted to be free in everything, and yet, of course, they were free in nothing. This parallels the lie of communism perfectly. The Soviet communism, I mean, right? We will be free of tyranny. We will have a perfect democracy, right? Like every man will how was it that Marx put it? Will be like a painter in the morning and a hunter in the evening and live a life of leisure. And what actually happens? Well, you wind up digging the hole. And they wanted to have no government. And what did they wind up with? They wound up with a terrible despotism. It's funny how that works. You know what I mean? They wanted to drive out lords and princes, and yet they became lords and princes far more despotic than the lords and princes that they drove out. They raised up false prophets and preachers among themselves and said God had sent the prophets and preachers. They also didn't hold anything about the sacraments, and they annihilated them. Again, not very Christian behavior. They dishonored churches and monasteries and tore down those. Yeah, they tore down all the monasteries as well. Very Christian of them, obviously. They didn't celebrate the holy days, be it Sundays or apostle days. This sounds a lot like Christian Frankism, like Christian antinomianism, essentially. They didn't hold the 4 seasons, and they held one day the same as another, making no distinction among the day. Whether it is Friday or Sunday, they eat meat every day. They lusted after their neighbor's housewife. They took as many wives as they wanted. Their lust was to kill. They betrayed everyone and did them in terms of their lives and property and everything they had. They had, some of them had their first wives beheaded. They had everyone bring up all their silver and gold and money. Some did willingly and others unwillingly. They undertook the word of God and holy scripture wrongly and established them as they themselves wished. The leaders of the rebaptizers established a king and said that God had made him a king, and they were waiting for Christ, who was supposed to descend from earth to heaven and walk among them on the earth for 1,000 years. Again, very messianic Judaism. They also believed, hang on, what's this? The king with his counselors and preachers made a matrimony among themselves and wouldn't uphold the matrimony that God had ordained. They said there hadn't been a real marriage in 1500 years, that the word of God had also been kept in the dark for that long, and that all the folk in the world had lived in heathendom for that long. So they were going to bring forth the word of God again and establish a new world and increase the world. Again, this is very Messianic Judaism. They said that Mary had given birth to more children after the birth of Christ, so that Christ had brothers and sisters, and that one man should have as much as the next, and this turned out unfairly. Yeah, it's funny how that works. Funny how that works, bro. Okay, so things began to get worse and worse and worse. Man, this book is like crazy, right? I just, as you just keep reading it, you're like, oh man, things have gotten like really bad. And you're like, oh wait, it gets worse. So stuff got really, really bad once the siege works around the city were completed, right? The Lord of Munster finally built like trenches all the way around the city. They made like blockhouses, which are like sort of the little buildings you have like on the corners of trenches and stuff like that. And then once the trenches were complete, it was realized that escape was impossible. So the Landsknechts had also manned the trench around the city with a watch at night, and they also kept a watch during the day on horseback and on foot, so that it was pretty much impossible for anyone to get away. Now, it's unsure how much fuckery was going on before the city was completely under siege. It's highly likely that there was, trade going on, that there was smuggling going on, that they were selling some of the like seized property out the back door. All of these kinds of like things tend to proliferate under these kinds of like harsh regimes. They confiscated the rest of the cattle, obviously, although the Landsknechts, attacked and took some of the cattle, and they basically like took all of the animals. And then the starvation intensified. The hunger and woe now became so great that the people rushed out of the city and got themselves killed, and some people could no longer walk on account of hunger and began to walk with canes. When the hunger became so great, the king put the people under great duress with the sword. Whoever said a word to the effect that he would be glad to get out of the city, or that he would rush from them, he had him put in prison right away and beheaded him right away on the next day. Some people imagined that they would endure, hoping that they would give up, because some people were beginning to die of hunger. So the king had a place partitioned off in front of each city gate. Whenever someone died in the city, whether he died of hunger or was shot to death or killed by the Landsknechts, or the king had him beheaded or did it himself, they buried these people in front of the gate where each one's watchpost was. Then the king no longer wished to bury the dead in the city, and he also wished to execute no more people in the city. So they, like, obviously the executions must have just gotten insane. But in the end, he again executed them in the city, and then he once more buried the dead in the city up at the cathedral square. Fuck, man. This is so Jim Jones. This is like just so insanely Jim Jones. And of course, cannibalism, right? Like, that was coming next, right? Cannibalism. Some guy was like a traitor. Wait, what did he do? He wrote a letter saying that he wrote a letter to the enemy, hoping that the Lord of Munster would grant him mercy. The rebaptizers found out, had him arrested. He was tortured and racked straight away. The king indicted him and cut his head off himself. They took the body, laid it on a bench, then cut it into 12 pieces with a meat cleaver. Then the king had one piece hung in front of each gate, and he had the head stuck out of the cathedral tower on a long pole. Klaus's heart and liver were carried home by a Hollander who boiled and ate it. Cannibalism. This shit always ends the same way, I swear to God. At that time, the hunger was great in the city, so that they didn't know where to turn. This is how the king busied himself with this man and how Klaus was betrayed by his companion. Dude, fucking mate. Hang on, wait, did we get any super chats or anything, Sades? Okay, let's see. So then the people started to flee. Basically, they were running out of food, and the rulers sort of like started basically saying, look, if you want to go, they probably did that thing where they're like, look, I am a benevolent king, right? I feel your pain, people. He who wishes to leave will be free to leave. It's fine. However, the people who applied to leave basically had to like wait at the gate for like days. Then they took everything that they had and then pushed them out the gate. And then the Landesknechts killed most of them, basically, right? They didn't kill the women and the children, but they did kill all the men who tried to cross between, in front of the trenches, basically. All the people who voluntarily left had all of their goods confiscated. All the all the same, they defected from the city. Such great hunger did they have in the city, for they much preferred to get themselves killed than to suffer such great hunger. After this time, there seldom was a time, day or night, that they didn't rush from the city. No one knew how to escape, particularly those who'd rushed into the city from the camp. They knew full well they couldn't escape, the one just as much as the other, for they were in dire straits. If they rushed from the city, they would be killed. If they remained in it, they would have to die of hunger. If they rushed from the city without permission and the king was informed of this, he would have them hung. This was the first time that they rushed from the city like this on the account of hunger and woe. The king and his counselors and the leaders, some of them, and also some burghers, had enough to eat. These men didn't run far. The provisions that they had taken, there were no humans, given how they were made things go in the city. Between heaven and earth, there could be no worse Christians than the king and his retinues, or than these rebaptizers. So then they tried to basically get the aged women and the children to flee, presumably so that they would have more food. And then they wound up eating the horses, what horses they had remained. In this way, they quieted the folk and they slaughtered some horses so that they each gave a piece of horse meat for each house. They had the horse meat taken to the butchers. The people went there and fetched the meat. The deacons asked everyone how many people were in each house. They gave a share to each person in accordance with this. They made a list of the houses indicating how many people each person had in the house, and they gave according to this list, having listed each homeowner under his name. And it turns out that they'd actually like killed a bunch of horses and cows early on because they didn't want to have to feed them. And then everyone was like, oh man, I wish we hadn't just killed and buried all these like horses and cows. We could have like salted the meat and still had like meat. But apocalyptics are never very forward thinking. Dude. Hang on a second. I don't think we've got any super chats. No. Okay. Now wait, next. Excuse me. So then the next thing that they do when they're like bored is they decide to elect 12 dukes, and they do this by drawing names from a hat, which they then disregard. So it's just a complete scam. Why 12 dukes? Because of the 12 tribes of Israel. Again, right? So they wound up with like 12 dukes. The commander took a slip of paper. Right. Yes. Okay. Look, dear brothers, the names of the dukes have been chosen. I'll place them in this boy's hat and I'll close the hat tight. The boy will then reach into the hat. Whatever name is on the first slip that the boy grabs in his hand is the duke. This is what happened. The boy reached into the hat and grabbed a slip. The commander took the slip from the boy and shouted out the name, and that man was then the duke. But the commander didn't read the name that the boy had taken out of the hat. He named the one that the king and the counselors had chosen. The commander straight away took the list out of the hat and threw it away. It reminds me of modern democracy, bro. Oh my god. Oh, this is just so freaking crazy. Um, and the Duke's appointed subordinates, and it just gets more and more crazy. They hold a reception. They dress the Dukes up in like silk and gold, and give them staves and all this kind of stuff. And the Dukes are then proclaimed that they will save the people as the leaders of the 12 tribes of the Israelites had done. I mean, okay, right? Like, it's very, I don't know, dispensationalist. Oh, incoming Ko-Fi. Oh, thank you, Ardent. I appreciate that, mate. Let me see. What do we got here? Oh, verifying that I'm human. I'm human. I'm a real boy, I tells ya. From Ardent Party for $5 US. Thank you very much, Ardent. I appreciate that, mate. Congratulations on infiltrating the British banquet on Millennial last night. Thank you very much. It was pretty cool. It was pretty cool. I did enjoy it. Although um I could not be as spicy as I wanted to be, quite frankly. I think there's a lot of cope going on personally. I really, really do. I wanted to just say, like, you kidding me, right? Like, this is the the people are gonna like rise up and, oh dude, in like 20 years, right? Like 20 years? Are you kidding me? My God. Mm-hmm. What's this place gonna look like in 20 years? My God. Anyway. Thank you, Arden. I appreciate that, mate. Um, so then 254. And then it just goes on. Starvation worsens. Like this whole thing is like starvation worsens, starvation worsens, right? It just gets more and more insane. And when I was reading this, right, like the thing that I kept thinking about, honestly, right, is people don't really realize like how bad shit can get, right? Like I think this is like a thing that people in the modern West, they're very, very resistant to this idea, right? They just don't really know how bad stuff can get. Like their idea of like how bad shit can get is way, way better than this. But I'm just saying, right? The hunger in the city now became so great that they died of hunger and defected from the city by night and by day, much preferring to get themselves killed than to die of hunger. Men and women and old sick people were starving, the young as well as the old, so that they walked with canes because they could walk no longer. Some of them fell down and died. The common folk used to receive bread from the community, but after this time, no one could get bread anymore. At this point, the common folk didn't know how they could feed themselves or how they could make it. The king with his retinue would not give up the city. They said they'd sooner starve to death than ask the men for mercy. The king still had good food with some of his retinue. These people still had enough to eat, but affliction befell the common folk. Yeah, I've never seen that before. So the king wouldn't ask any men for mercy, but only God and the Father. But in the end, they would all, in fact, have asked men for mercy if they could have gotten mercy. But the door to mercy was closed with the Landsknechts when the city was captured. So yes, it just gets progressively worse. So then a bunch of the women leave, and then a burger defects to the Landsknechts, 264. Now, this turned out to be a crucial event because the soldiers outside did not kill him, but rather brought him to the commander. I presume they offered him food, and in return for his life, he basically gave them all the information on how to attack the city. He sketched out the siege works and everything like that, and then the soldiers outside, he basically proposed a plan for how they could capture the city, um, and then this basically precipitated the attack. Um, Once the rebaptizers saw the Landsknechts had taken the burger and his companion prisoner, about 200 defected from the city after them. Some were taken prisoner and some were killed. Those who were taken prisoner were taken to Waldbeck and executed there. All too few were those who escaped from there. So why did they not execute this guy? I don't know. I don't know. Um, So then supposedly the king was replaced. It just gets crazy. And then they attack the city. Where is it? 272. Come on. So the soldiers headed for the city and were going to attack it. The burghers set off in advance, and the peasants followed him with a gangway. Once they came to the city and the moat, the peasants brought the gangway to the moat. Okay, so yeah, basically they got a gangway across. Soldiers got in, and then basically they just looted the city. They attacked and killed all of the rebaptizers. And yeah, basically they ran ahead into the city, thinking more about the booty than keeping possession of the gate until they know whether they won the city or not. Now, this is an interesting thing. The soldiers, the Lunge Connects, thought that there was a bunch of gold inside the city. I mean, it would make sense. Supposedly the government confiscated all the gold. Munster was quite a wealthy city, but it turns out that there wasn't very much gold in there. And the soldiers actually got very, very pissy and had to be like persuaded to leave because there wasn't enough gold, which does beg the question of where the gold went. My suspicion is that they were probably trading it with smugglers to get food during the time when the siege was partial. And then once the siege works around the city was complete and all smuggling routes were closed off, they couldn't get supplies in. They chased each other up and down the streets and fought and shot each other until daylight. They fought a fierce battle up at the cathedral square. Then the rebaptizers suffered great losses, so that the Landsknechts then got the upper hand. So the rebaptizers retreated up to St. Michael's Church, up at the cathedral square, and shot out of it. Eventually, they took a stand up at the market with their wagon fort. The Landsknechts had pipes and drums with them in the city and some pennants, so that the king and the rebaptizers imagined that the main company was in the city. The king then made his way out with some Anabaptists, and they took possession of St. Hilgen's Gate, while some still remained up at the marketplace. But in the end, first one looked after himself, and then the next. So a bunch of them committed suicide, I believe, is what that basically means. When the king went his way, they hid themselves in the cellars, in corners, so that the soldiers had a winning hand. When the city was won, the captains had a colloquy with the king and some burghers who retreated with him up to the gate. They talked with him. The king and the burghers kept requesting that they be taken prisoner and that the burghers be allowed to go to their houses until the Lord of Munster came into the city. Some of the burghers went to the houses and they put the king and Knipper Dolling and some others in prison. The captains got the keys to all the gates and they took possession of the Jewfields Gate. So basically, right, like those burghers who were taken prisoner were all killed in the end. So this is very, very, very bloody. Now that they had the city, the Landsknechts Landesknechten ran into all the houses throughout the whole city, and they searched for the rebaptizers in the cellars, in the corners, upstairs, and downstairs in the houses. They found some, and they dragged them out of the houses by their hair and then killed them in the streets. So angry were the soldiers after having suffered such great losses outside the city. There was no mercy. In some houses, they still found butter, cheese, meat, and flour, and in the king's cellar, they found 5 or 6 vats of wine and 1 vat of beer, and food enough that the king and all the leaders had no privation yet, because they still had enough to eat, so that some people would say that they certainly could have held the city for a year. The king and his retinue would have certainly held the city for half a year, if not longer. They would also have starved all the common folk to death. When the city was won, some soldiers said that in vessels they'd found children that were salted, consisting of hands and feet and legs. Yeah. For the leaders of the rebaptizers had said in good time if they had nothing more to eat, they would have eaten the old ladies. If they would have eaten even fat old wives, they would have had to eat them in good time before they starved to death. Man, these fucking people, man, have totally totally fucking mental, right? Like just completely mental. Oh yeah, and okay, so this bit is about the gold. Yes. The troops were dissatisfied with the booty, boys. The booty was not to their liking. It was not big Latina booty. Nay, I tell you, it was flat. There was not enough booty to be going around. Right, enough of the booty jokes. Hang on a second. Now that the city was captured, all goods were plunder. Half of the goods and the city and the heavy artillery going to my gracious lord, and half of the goods to the soldiers. So they appointed booty masters. Yar, I be the booty master. I wonder what that is in German. Is that like literally like Booty Meister? Ja, ich bin ein Booty Meister, ja. Oh, dude. Right. So sorry, this is too stupid. So they appointed booty masters. They sold everything that there was in the houses in the way of household furnishings, beds, cans, and jars, and they turned it all into money. Who were they selling it to? I mean, I like, did they literally have like merchants like also like turning up at the city and being like, come on down, right? Like we're looting the city. There'll be like tons of like good deals like for traveling merchants. This is not explained, but maybe so, right? Whatever each soldier had gotten in the way of money and gold and silver, they were obliged under their oath to bring to the booty. I can't write any more about whether this is what happened. The soldiers held 5 or 6 common assemblies, and each man would have been glad to have his booty. For the booty was not distributed as soon as they would have liked. The soldiers imagined that there had been 5 or 6 tons of gold in the city. When they looked around, the soldiers didn't get half a ton of gold as their booty. At this, the soldiers became outraged and clamped the booty masters into irons. Yar, you're not giving me a fair share of the booty. There must be more booty. For the soldiers imagined that the booty masters were correct in dealing with the booty because there ought to have been more gold in the city. There'd been a soldier in the city with the rebaptizers, and he was taken prisoner in the city and remained alive. And he came back to the city now that it was captured. This soldier said that he knew full well there was more gold in the city, saying the king had a great treasure with him consisting of money, silver, and gold. It was while talking drunk that he informed the soldiers of this. Then the soldiers first set to work and began to rage. They held a common assembly and had the connect come to the assembly. I presume that's like the head of the lunch connecting. They then prepared delegates and they sent them to the king and had him questioned under torture, so that he would say how much gold there'd been in the city and where the gold now was. They couldn't get information out of the king or find any more gold. Then they came again with the connect, and he couldn't prove that there was any more gold in the city or where the gold now was. The connect asked for mercy, so the Lund connects shouted that he should be let go. The captains had his head cut off because he caused so much outrage among the soldiers. The Lund connected. Sorry for any German speakers listening to this. I know I'm butchering that word like terribly. Officials tortured by the troops in the vain attempt to find more booty. So the soldiers once again held a common assembly. They wanted to kill all the booty masters as well as the captains and to plunder the city one more time and to sell the goods once more. Once they held the assemblies, they had the booty masters come into the center of the assembly and ask them if they did know of more gold. The booty masters said no, they couldn't get more gold together than what amounted to a half ton of gold, so that each soldier got 16 Emden guilders as booty. I don't know what an Emden guilder is like worth. So the soldiers had 2 of the booty masters racked on the ladder by the hangman so that they would say where the gold now was. They couldn't get any information out of the booty masters. They didn't know of any gold. Basically, it's insane, man. Eventually, the Lord of Munster wrote to the city that they should vacate the city for him, because they'd certainly always been paid and they should take their booty and evacuate the city. Otherwise, his grace would see what he would have to do with the Landsknechten. The soldiers. What do you have to do with the soldiers? The soldiers held a common assembly once more, and they saw they couldn't get any more from the booty. The booty was run out, boys. And then they moved out of the city as a company. And so that was basically it. That was basically the end of it. Let me see. The treatment of the surviving Anabaptists. While the soldiers were located in the city until they received their booty, they would say that they were being poisoned by the female Anabaptists. So the Lord had all the female Anabaptists who were still in the city come up to the cathedral square together. He took some women who were the leaders of the female Anabaptists out of the company. Some of these women were executed. They would not, in fact, abandon the baptizing and would stand by their faith. They then drove all the other women out of the city. In the end, they came back and some moved away to other lands. Some would say they moved to England. Yeah, I wonder if that's... I think the levelers happened like after that. Maybe that's where the levelers came from. The Lord was in the city for 4 or 5 days and then moved out of the city. He had the king, John of Leyden, Knipperdolling, and certain others brought from the city to one of his castles, and there they were kept in prison until the time they were executed. The king and Knipperdolling each had a collar with an iron chain around his neck, and they ran like this beside the horses when they were brought out of the city. I can write nothing of where the queen wound up with her fellow wives. So that's basically it, bros, right? That's basically it. The survivors, well, the ringleaders, as I said, were... it says on Wikipedia that they were tortured and executed in the marketplace of Munster. This is a drawing of this happening, apparently. So this looks like they were getting the hot tongs treatment. Very, very unpleasant, and probably no less than they deserved, to be quite frank. I don't know how this squares with the account, but it might be that the guy who was writing this actually had left Munster by this time. So he didn't want to write about stuff that, he couldn't see. Now, in terms of the aftermath, the Munster Rebellion was a turning point for the Anabaptist movement. It never again had the opportunity of assuming political importance, as both Catholic and Lutheran civil powers adopted stringent measures to counter this. It is difficult to trace the subsequent history of the group as a religious body through changes in the names and beliefs held. And so this is the sort of real question: is what happened to the Anabaptists afterwards, right? Some of their beliefs survived. The Amish in America are sort of Anabaptist, but they're not, they're not like crazy about it. So this very particular, very, very radical version of Anabaptism seemed to die out, but you did have sort of a reoccurrence of other sort of what, Vogelin and Schafarevich would call Christian communist sects sort of later on. The Battenbergers under Jan van Battenberg preserved the violent millennialist stream of Anabaptism seen at Munster. They were polygamous and believed force was justified against anyone not in their sect. They sound lovely, really. Their movement went underground after the suppression of the Munster Rebellion, with members posing as Catholics or Lutherans as necessary, right? And so this whole posing as other groups, this leaves the question open, right? Again, a bit like Christian Frankists, I guess, right? Like, oh, yes, we're pretending to be, Lutherans or Catholics or whatever. There was a lot of crazy shit happening in this part of the world in the 1500s. Most notably, what was going down in Bohemia. There was like a big war, Jan Hus, all of this just crazy stuff, the Brotherhood of the Free Spirit. There was just a lot of stuff going around after the Reformation, after the sort of idea of sola scriptura, the wide distribution of the Bible to essentially idiots who would then, crack open the Bible and just sort of make whatever they wanted out of it and suddenly be like, hey, it says in the Bible. And then, of course, there's also probably the influence of Kabbalah and Hermeticism and other kinds of stuff that was going on after the Spanish expulsion as well. A lot of the Jews expelled from Spain went to Holland, which makes you wonder about the Dutch that, and the Frisians that were, but yes, it was a very, very crazy period. Some non-resistant Anabaptists found leaders in Menno Simons and the brothers Obbe and Dirk Phillips, Dutch Anabaptist leaders, who repudiated the distinctive doctrines of the Munster Anabaptists. This group eventually became known as the Mennonites after Simons. They rejected any use of violence and preached a faith based on compassion and love of the enemy. And the Mennonites are the Amish. The Amish are Mennonites. But they eschewed violence and would just became like much more peaceful. So, maybe they were actually Christians. In August 1536, the leaders of Anabaptist groups influenced by Melchior Hoffman met in Bocholt in an attempt to maintain unity. The meeting included the followers of Battenberg, the survivors of Munster, David Joris and his sympathizers, and the non-resident Anabaptists. At this meeting, the major areas of dispute between the sects were polygamous marriage and the use of force against non-believers. Joris proposed compromise by declaring the time had not yet come to fight against the authorities and that it would be unwise to kill any non-Anabaptists. Fucking psychos. The gathered Anabaptists agreed to the compromise of no more force, but the meeting did not prevent the fragmentation of Anabaptism. And after the 30 Years' War, the Treaty of Augsburg in 1648, the Anabaptists were deliberately left out of the settlement. Just sort of, I'll probably do like an episode on this as well. But the Treaty of Augsburg, the Treaty of Westphalia. Pardon me. I think it was signed in Augsburg. The Treaty of Westphalia was the foundation of the modern nation state, and it was backed by this idea of who's king, whose religion. So up until that point, the Catholics and the Protestants were basically fighting in every single country. Every time a Catholic monarch went on the throne, the Protestants in that country would try and overthrow him, and vice versa. And this resulted in the 30 Years' War and all kinds of like horrors. 30 Years' War was terrible. And the settlement was, right, whatever religion the king of that country is, that's the religion that everyone is in. The people who don't like it, they can leave. They can take their movable property. They can't be like killed or molested, but they can't hang around and they can't foment the overthrow of the monarch. And the Anabaptists were deliberately excluded as one of the legitimate religions. It was the Catholics, the Lutherans, and I think there was one other, maybe the Calvinists. I can't remember, but the Anabaptists were definitely excluded because of all of the crap that happened in Munster. So remember, kids, if you do a communism, this is what you're gonna wind up in, bros. You'll be hanging from a cage from Munster Cathedral. So I hope you enjoyed that, bros. I don't know what I'm gonna do next week, but it is a weird tale, and it has been used to sort of justify this idea that communism comes from Christianity. I don't know about that. It's certainly not like none of this is very Christian. Oh, I'm sharing the wrong tab, aren't I? God damn it. We're still stuck on a previous screen. Yes, we are stuck on a previous screen. Thanks very much. So, but whether this is actually Christianity or not, it's not like any Christianity I'm really aware of, right? I mean, like, you can take a frog and put a saddle on it and call it a horse, but that doesn't make it a horse. You know what I mean, right? Yeah, sorry, I didn't switch the thing. God damn it. So yes, I hope you enjoyed all of that. Let's just say a quick hello to everyone in the chat. Yes, Gibbets on Rumble. Teabagging Therapist, good to see you, mate. Mikey Bikey. Anybody else? I know. Look, I'll be back at the usual time next week. J Chiva Loophole. Thanks for coming, bros. It's nice to see you. On YouTube, 007. Good to see you, sir. Ardent Party. Fragile Thinking. Wyatt's Torch. Stumbling. Anybody else? King Anus. Sunny Jim. Drip Feed to the Brain. Jack B. Nimble. Good to see you guys. Thanks for coming. I think that's everybody. Phoenician, good to see you, Phoenician. Anybody else? I think it's everyone. And on Odyssey, you got no one. Yes, well, that's what you do. That's what you get when you do an episode at the wrong time. But I will be back at the usual time on Monday. I hope you all enjoy that. Good to see you all. Good night, everyone, and God bless. Bye.